Nations depend on rules. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers.
The rhetoric was ratcheted up for what Keir Starmer was describing as a complete break with past immigration policy.
A strategy absolutely central to my plan for change that will finally take back control of our borders and close the book on a squalid chapter for our politics, our economy and our country.
Keir Starmer hopes in a few years' time he can deploy this graph of net migration as proof of promises delivered. Net migration soared from negative numbers just over 3 decades ago, climbing steadily, a huge issue for David Cameron, who along with successors promised to bring it down. It shot up again after COVID under Boris Johnson, but has already started coming down due to a clampdown brought in by Rishi Sunak.
Make no mistake, this plan means migration will fall. That's a promise.
The overseas recruitment of care workers scheme set up by Boris Johnson will be shut down. Migrants who come to the UK on skilled worker visas will in future have to be graduates. The threshold was lowered by Boris Johnson's government. All migrants will be required to learn a higher standard of English. The government worries some dependents in particular don't learn English and don't integrate. Universities could face a charge for every overseas student they bring in. And student visas will be trimmed back to 18 months from 2 years.
We've seen lots of people have an attempt at bringing down immigration numbers. In terms of its magnitude, where does this sit in the pantheon?
I think today's measures are really a collection of small and medium-sized tweaks to the immigration system that add up to a moderate restriction. The government says that they think they'll grant around 100,000 fewer visas as a result, which is equivalent to about 10% of the number of visas granted last year.
Care is the single sector hit hardest. The government wants more recruitment from inside the UK. But Anita Astle, who runs a care home in Nottinghamshire, says those applying from inside the UK just don't want the jobs.
But those people, when we talk about the type of work that's involved, they don't want to do that type of work. And at the end of the day, our ladies and gents deserve people that want to work with them, that have that inherent compassion and caring nature, that kindness, humanity and kindness that they deserve.
Are you all right?
Kemi Oladipopo was originally from Nigeria. 2 days of headlines about the planned shutdown of the care visa system have left her unsure of her status.
That's it. I feel welcomed until yesterday, but that's blast of news. So probably we will need another engagement. We want to hear if we're still welcomed in this country, that we enter into legally or not.
Have you been on a bit of a journey yourself on this? Did you used to believe that higher immigration led to higher growth? Would Keir Starmer a few years ago have talked about an island of strangers?
Well, Gary, thank you very much. I invite you to dig out my conference speech at Labour Party conference. I know you remember them all. But 3 years ago now, I think it was, when I made the very political argument that I've made this morning, which is that take back control, understanding why you need control, selection of fair immigration is a Labour argument.
When you heard some of the language that Keir Starmer was using today, there's a risk that people feel they're in an island of strangers, incalculable damage of immigration. What's going through your mind?
Enoch Powell, April 1968, when he used the Rivers of Blood speech and said this was becoming an alien land for people in this country.
Is this the man you thought you knew? He says he hasn't been on a journey.
Well, it seems to me like he's either been on a journey or been very, very silent for a very long time about what his views actually are.
Today, a further 600 young men already today have been processed through Dover. Perhaps the odd Iranian terrorist among them. Who knows?
How do you know? Jeremy Corbyn heckled Nigel Farage as he switched the focus onto illegal migration. The Reform leader said without withdrawal from the European Convention on Human Rights, small boat crossings would continue. Keir Starmer ruled out withdrawal, saying that could jeopardise future deportation deals. But he knows the political impact of these images and is promising legislation to steer judges away from allowing some potential deportees to remain on human rights grounds. Well, it looks quite plausible if you talk to experts in this realm that Keir Starmer could get numbers significantly down by the time of the next general election, not only because of his own measures, but perhaps doing heavier lifting because of Rishi Sunak's initial measures tightening visas. But will voters actually give him the credit if numbers are at, say, sort of close to 300,000 net migration? Those are the sort of numbers that began to cause David Cameron a lot of problems. Will voters actually pat Keir Starmer on the back for the fact that that is lower than an earlier number? We seem to be getting into a certain pattern of behaviour here with this government as we begin to understand it more and more. The rhetoric is often thunderous. In this case, rhetoric borrowed very much from Nigel Farage. I mean, the forward from the Prime Minister in this document that the damage done to this country is incalculable by immigration, public services and housing access placed under pressure, trust damaged and wounded in politics. You get thunderous rhetoric, and then you get the actual document and you go through it, and it isn't quite thunderous. As you heard, Madeleine Sumption there, impeccably objective observer of these fields, saying that this was a small to medium, moderate change in policy. And that isn't quite, perhaps, what this debate needs for Keir Starmer to shift the dial.
Gary Gibbon in Westminster. Well, earlier I spoke to the Skills Minister, Jackie Smith, and began by asking her what the Prime Minister meant when he said there was incalculable damage caused by people coming into Britain in his speech today.
Well, what the Prime Minister was talking about was the understandable sense of unfairness that people feel when they see, despite being a country that has really benefited from migration and where people tend to be very generous and open, what we've seen in recent years is a quadrupling of the numbers of people, the levels of net migration, whilst at the same time people are seeing, for example, their opportunities to get the skills that they need to get on in work, or for their children to get the jobs, the skilled jobs that they would want, not being supported because we've seen such a big fall in investment in training, both by the last government and to an extent by employers. Well, when people see that, however much they know and value the individuals that come to this country and contribute, they think the system isn't fair.
Are people right to think that the system is unfair? Is there a direct link between the number of people who came in as legal immigrants and the underfunding of education and training and skills?
I think there is, because what you've seen develop in our economy under the last government is that where we needed skilled labour, what the government essentially did was allow employers simply to fill those skills gaps by bringing people in from overseas, whilst at the same time you were seeing fewer young people being able to get an apprenticeship, you were seeing the levels of vacancies linked to skills growing. So people said, well, this doesn't make sense.
But incalculable damage is a pretty incendiary phrase. The government is now telling people to look at immigrants as the source of incalculable damage.
That is absolutely not what people are being asked to do. As I say, the British people are fair and tolerant, and they understand, as do we, the enormous contribution that has been made by migration and will continue to be.
Who caused incalculable damage, in your words?
What causes incalculable damage is a system that the last government led to getting out of control.
The one sort of big thing that you've announced is the ending of care worker visas. There were only 9,500 care worker visas given out in the year to December 2024. This is a tiny drop in the ocean when you're talking about 700,000 visas given out in a year.
No, there's a whole series of announcements which relate to skilled work routes, that relate to study routes, that relate to the linking of the ability of people to be able to sponsor people to come into this country with them actually making a contribution to developing skills. Well, what we've said in terms of the white paper is that will be probably 50,000 fewer visas next year and up to 100,000 fewer by the end of this Parliament. But what it will also do...
That's still a very small number, isn't it, given the 700,000 came in?
what it will also do is it will much more clearly demonstrate the enormous contribution that can be made by migration. Because what we'll be saying is, look, where people really have a contribution to make to this country, where they're going to help the economy to grow, where they're bringing really important and scarce skills, they will be very welcome into the country. Where they're doing skilled work,
very important and scarce skills.
Well,
there are 130,000 vacancies in the care sector. British people don't want to do those jobs.
Well, care is one of the most important jobs that people can do. But of course, what's happened in the care sector is that we've been asking people to do one of those most important jobs with pretty poor levels of pay, pretty poor levels of career progression, which is why the government is currently taking through Parliament a fair pay agreement for care. It's why we're determined to reform the way in which care is offered. Now,
but in the meantime, there are vacancies, and there are people from abroad who want to come in and do those jobs. They are valuable jobs in your own terms, and you're cutting them off.
I was just coming to that, Christian. In the meantime, what we've seen is a very big increase in the numbers of people who came in on care visas. Quite a few of those people, we estimate, I think about 40,000, are in the country now. They should be being used in the care sector during this period of transition.
You're also warning that we risk becoming an island of strangers. Now, that's a phrase that's really annoyed some of your Labour MP colleagues.
People are feeling the unfairness of the system, which doesn't help us with the type of coherent country that we are, cohesive country that we are, and that we want to continue being.
If you're very concerned about us becoming an island of strangers, why is the government in negotiation about an EU youth mobility scheme that will allow millions of foreigners to come and live in Britain?
It is part of the work that we are in the process of doing to reset our relationship with the European Union, not going back on freedom of movement. That won't be reintroduced.
Jackie Smith, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, joining me now is Reform's Deputy Leader, MP Richard Tice. How would you get British workers to take these jobs in care homes that they're not taking?
Good evening. Well, we have a clear economic policy of lifting the starting point of paying any income tax from £12,500 to £20,000. For many people, that's a net, give or take, £30 a week. That's a critical factor in making work pay, and that's the key thing. And what's happened by...
But it doesn't make care
hang on,
more
let me
appealing,
answer the question. Let me answer the question. If you constantly import cheap, modestly skilled overseas labour, then you suppress British wages. And what's happened for 15 years, there has been a relentless suppression of British wages, which means that that's made it less attractive to people. And for too many people, they're now trapped on benefits because work doesn't pay for them. And so we have to put the onus on all employers, including care providers, to train up and employ our own people. And interestingly,
why would you work in a care home rather than retail or a supermarket, which pays the same or more, if your only solution is the tax system, which applies to all jobs? How are you going to make care more appealing?
Isn't that how the market works? If care is not appealing, then guess what? You have to put the wages up. But because there's been a never-ending stream of cheap, low-skilled labour from overseas, I will repeat what I've just said. It has suppressed wages in certain sectors. You need to bring social care to work much more closely with the NHS.
Okay.
And when I was in a care home in my constituency of Boston Skegness just a few weeks ago, do you know what? They didn't talk about a recruitment crisis. What they talked about was the bureaucratic processes and procedures that delayed and damaged patient care because of certain things that the care workers couldn't do, that only doctors or the hospitals had to do, which actually cost extra money and delayed care.
Which other visas do you think we should cancel? I mean, the government reckons might get to about 100,000. Which other kinds of people do you think we should stop coming?
You're looking at this completely the wrong way. Our target is to have net zero immigration. So about 400,000 people leave the UK every year. So you could welcome smart immigration of a similar number. You have a net zero increase in the population. Here's the point, though.
But how would you prioritise this? Is it just one in, one out, or would you
let the
stop
market
categories?
With a few exceptions, you let the market decide. Where you've got certain particular shortages, of course, you can prioritise those. You do it over a 3-year period. But this announcement by the government today, lots of warm words. We've had that from the Tories for the last 15 years. The point is they haven't set a target.
But all of these
They've
visas...
got no intention of reducing the numbers. And we won the election 12 days ago because the British people are sick and tired of mass immigration, both legal and illegal.
But all of these visas are supposedly in shortage areas.
Supposedly.
So which ones would you stop?
Supposedly. Look, we're not short of people in this country, for heaven's sake.
No, but we're short of people who'll work.
Just listen to my answer, please. We've got a record population of 70 million people. We've got 9 million people economically active. We've got over 5 million people on out-of-work benefits. We are not short of people. We are short of the motivation to get people back into work. So you change the tax system, and you have to also, you've got to motivate people, and you've got to say to young people, do you know what? You can't just sit there on your backside watching TV claiming benefits. Actually, work is a good thing. And you've got to get up, get out and get on. And we have to be clearly robust with people and say there's no such thing as a free lunch.
So we should cut benefits as well?
What we've got to do is make clear you've got to make work pay, you've got to train people, you have a tax on employers if you are employing people from overseas. It used to work 30 or 40 years ago, so maybe we've got something wrong. I repeat the point. We're not short of people in this country. What we've done is we haven't made work pay for too many people because of the threshold on income tax and because we've suppressed British wages by bringing in so many people from overseas. And the British people have just voted with their feet.
But you are talking
They're sick
about
and tired of it.
benefits,
They've had enough. They're sick and tired of it. They've had enough, and they want to get to net zero immigration. It's only Reform UK that stands for that.
You've got to make it better than benefits.
Exactly, which is why you've got to lift the income tax threshold. That's the crux of our economic policy. You motivate people to go into work, and that is a great thing because work is a good thing.
Do you worry at all that Keir Starmer's parked his rhetorical tanks on your lawn?
Look, he's talked all the words that we've heard from so many of the uniparty politicians, but they never actually deliver. And the fact that he didn't demur from the ONS migration forecast per annum last week, they said it would get to 520,000 net as a medium-term average. He didn't resolve from that. He should have done. You've got to get to net zero. That's why we're doing well, because we're in touch with the concerns of the British people.
Richard Tice, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jackie.
Now, as we've been hearing, one of the government's big announcements today was that decision to end visas for people coming to the UK to work in the adult social care sector. Our data correspondent, Kieran Jenkins, has been taking a look at what that means. Kieran.
Thanks, Jackie. Yes, so the government is ending care worker visas, a massive driver of the rise in migration in recent years. Although, as you'll see, they're already way down. So after Boris Johnson's Conservative government introduced a health and care visa in early 2022 to fill tens of thousands of vacancies, there was a huge spike. These are care visas alone, peaking at around 108,000 in 2023, and that's not including any family members these workers were bringing along. Then this dotted line, Rishi Sunak stopped people being able to bring family, and that meant numbers fell to less than 10,000 care worker visas last year. So there's less scope now for the government to really slash back net migration by cutting care worker visas. But, of course, huge numbers of those overseas workers are still in the system. Just look at how reliant social care became on them after that visa route opened. This dotted line here. British nationals went from 83% of care workers, with foreign nationals making up 17% before that visa came in, to just 73% British workers last year, with overseas nationals now up to 27% of care workers overall. So what's stopping domestic recruitment? Well, a key factor is pay. British workers weighing up whether the job is worth it. According to England's care workforce body, Skills for Care, in the year ending March 2024, the average care worker was getting £11 per hour, slightly more than the average cleaner on £10.91 per hour. But you could work in retail for the same pay, £11 an hour, as a care worker. And you could work in the NHS as a healthcare assistant and earn more, with starting salaries of £11.67 an hour. So the question from the care sector to the government is, Where's this vital workforce going to come from now? The latest number of vacancies in the care sector is an estimated 131,000 in England. Clearly, many providers are pretty worried this evening.